Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. A personal dream of mine is that every case we cover on BrainScratch eventually gets an episode of Case Cracked. And that's what we have here today. We originally covered the Claremont killings in September of 2016, and today we're going to talk about the critical pieces that helped solve this case for 2 of the 3 victims. This episode is called Sample AJM42. Claremont is a beautiful, wealthy suburb located in Perth, Western Australia. However, in 1996 and 1997, one girl went missing and 2 others were killed after visiting popular night spots. Police suspected a serial killer, and their investigation would become the biggest, longest-running, and most expensive investigation in the state's history. It would take 24 years to bring the killer to justice for 2 of these women. For the other, we're still waiting. Today, we'll be looking at the Claremont serial killings case, and we'll begin with 18-year-old Ciara Spears. It's around midnight on January 27, 1996, and Ciara and a group of friends had just been picked up from the Ocean Beach Hotel by Ciara's sister, Amanda. From there, she drove the group to Claremont, where they attended Club Bayview nightclub. At 1:30 a.m., Ciara decided to leave and told her friends she was going to call a taxi. Around 2 a.m., she called Swan Taxis from a public telephone booth nearby and requested to be taken to Mossman Park. 3 eyewitnesses saw her waiting near the corner of Sterling Road and Sterling Highway, but they also saw an unidentified car that was stopped while she was there. Just moments later, at 2:09, her taxi pulled up, but didn't find Ciara. She was reported missing to the South Perth Police Station on Monday after she failed to attend a family gathering on Sunday afternoon and failed to show up to work. Within 48 hours, the Major Crime Squad stepped in and took over the investigation from local authorities. This would kick off years of searches that so far have left us with no answers. Now, we move on to look at the case of 23-year-old Jane Rimmer. Between 8 and 8:30 p.m. on Saturday, June 8, 1996, Jane and her friends took a taxi to the Continental Hotel in Claremont after spending time at the Ocean Beach Hotel. The group arrived around 9:30 p.m. and stayed there until just after 11:30 before they left and traveled to Club Bayview. Unfortunately, the line at the club was too long and they couldn't get in. Her friends decided to finish the night by taking another cab to a friend's house nearby. As the group neared the Continental's taxi stand, Jane informed her friends that she didn't want to go home. With that, she turned and walked away. As they pulled away in their cab, they called out to her and again asked her to come with them. She declined and they drove off. The last sighting of Jane was around midnight on security camera footage outside the Continental as she talked with an unidentified man. The man walks away, leaving her alone before the camera cuts away. When it returns, Jane can no longer be seen. Police feared that the same person had taken both women. Unfortunately, 55 days later, on Saturday, August 3, 1996, a Wellard resident found Jane's naked body 40 kilometers or 25 miles south of Claremont in bushland near Wolcott Road. A forensic pathologist would rule that Jane's cause of death was unascertainable, but she added that, quote, "I cannot exclude the possibility that it was the result of a neck injury, a diamond-shaped injury to her neck, which was about 10 centimeters by 17 centimeters in size and had a raggedness to it as though her killer used a bladed instrument in a cutting action. Injuries to her left forearm indicated defensive wounds. They believe that she assumed a boxing position as she tried to defend herself from a blade." After Jane's disappearance, the Western Australia Police set up a special task force called Macro to investigate both cases. Finally, we have 27-year-old Ciara Glennon. On Friday, March 14, 1997, Ciara went out for drinks with friends from work to the Continental Hotel. At around midnight, she walked outside in the direction of Sterling Highway to find a taxi to take her to her parents' house 10 minutes away. Her sister was getting married soon, and with her bachelorette party the following night, Ciara wanted to be rested up for it. A man at a nearby bus stop saw her at around 12:30 a.m. walking south along Sterling Highway. He also saw her interacting with an unidentified light-colored vehicle which had stopped nearby. A few minutes later, he turned back and the vehicle and Ciara were gone. When her mother discovered that she didn't come home the night before, she immediately called the police. Within 24 hours, the Macro Task Force was searching for her, fearing that she had fallen victim to their suspect. The Western Australian government soon offered a $250,000 reward, the largest ever offered in the state at that time, for information leading to the serial killer. During that time, Ciara's family made the difficult decision to go ahead with her sister's wedding. Then, 19 days after her disappearance, on the morning of April 3rd, Ciara's semi-clothed body was found by a bushwalker 40 kilometers or 25 miles north, near Piccadilly Road in Eglinton. A forensic pathologist would find that Ciara had been struck with an object that fractured her skull, momentarily stunning her before she was killed. This injury left a large gaping wound that ran from her right temple down to her neck. There was also a large cut, about 20 centimeters long, on her right arm, showing that, like Jane, she had defensive wounds likely caused by a blade. But her fight had not ended there. The pathologist also found that Ciara's left thumbnail had been severely damaged, and the tip of her right ring fingernail was torn off completely as she fought her attacker. Samples were taken from both. Fibers were taken from her hair, and other DNA samples were tested and showed that her attacker was a man. Next, investigators collected a large number of DNA samples from the area and from Ciara herself. Like Jane, Ciara was found covered in vegetation that had been torn from nearby trees. Both women were also found with an outstretched arm above their heads. Unfortunately, the evidence taken from Ciara's fingernail scraping was deemed too small to be analyzed and were locked away under the labels AJM40 and AJM42. Investigators focused on the unidentified vehicles seen at the two locations and the unidentified man seen on Jane's CCTV footage. This led to the suspicion that their perpetrator was one of Perth's taxi drivers. Thousands of licensed drivers were then fingerprinted and DNA tested. What they found was that the area had many more unlicensed operators than originally thought, which led to standards for eligibility being raised. As many as 78 drivers with significant criminal histories lost their licenses, and stricter standards were applied that made sure all insignias and equipment were stripped from decommissioned taxis. For years, the investigation languished. No new evidence was found, but suspects were eliminated as advances in DNA technology became available. In September of 2005, Macro lost the investigation and everything moved to the Special Crimes Squad. It would take a new generation of detectives, well-versed in new DNA extraction techniques, to finally get things moving again. Samples of fibers taken from Ciara's hair, marked AJM54, were reanalyzed and were found to contain 41 critical fibers. Some of these were unique and matched a fabric called Telstra Blue. Telstra is Australia's leading telecommunications and technology company, and this fabric was part of uniforms worn by Telstra technicians in the mid-1990s. They also found vehicle seat material that was used in Holden VS Commodores. This was also the same make and model vehicle that Telstra employees used at that same time. As we mentioned before, fingernail scrapings, known as AJM40 and AJM42, were taken from Ciara during her autopsy, but the pathologist labeled them too small to be analyzed. In 2008, Dr. Jonathan Whitaker of the Forensic Science Service in London, England, examined the two original samples. By combining the two, he increased the amount of biological material. Once his results were matched with the original results from the 90s that showed a male attacker, they were able to find a DNA match in a man named Bradley Robert Edwards. At this time, Edwards was living in the house he and his second wife had bought at Cudall in eastern Perth in 2000. They were married in 1997, only 17 days after the murder of Ciara, and only 2 days before her body was discovered. Edwards was well liked at his job at Telstra and was promoted frequently. He was well liked in his community as well. On weekends, he worked as a timekeeper and photographer at local athletic clubs. He would also serve as a records officer and then club president at the Belmont Club before receiving an award for 10 years of service at Cute Ol' Little Athletics Club. The city of Belmont even awarded him with the Community Spirit Award for his, quote, tireless work. At the time of his arrest, Edwards' veneer of normality had started to crack. His wife was leaving him because she claimed that their relationship had started to escalate, that she was terrified and feared for her life. Now that investigators knew the name of their perpetrator, they just needed one last DNA sample to seal the deal. Patiently, detectives watched Edwards until they saw him leaving a movie theater with his stepdaughter. When the man threw away a Sprite bottle, officers closed in and confiscated it for testing. Their tests would show matches to the evidence. Finally, on December 22, 2016, Bradley Robert Edwards was arrested at home. In all, he would be charged with 8 offenses: the home invasion and unlawful detention of an 18-year-old woman in Huntingdale in 1988 when he was known as the Huntingdale Prowler. Her attacker left behind a white kimono that was held in evidence and contained his DNA. The unlawful detention and 2 counts of aggravated sexual penetration without consent of a 17-year-old girl in Claremont in 1995, as well as the murders of Jane Rimmer and Ciara Glennon. He would also be charged in 2018 for the murder of Sarah Spears. It would take almost 4 years and 7 months at trial for Edwards to finally be convicted. Throughout his trial, defense attorneys claimed that incompetent police work and contaminated DNA evidence could not be trusted to convict their client. Edwards never took the stand on his own defense, and finally, on October 21, 2019, pleaded guilty to the 5 non-murder charges. On September 24, 2020, he was found guilty of the murders of Jane Rimmer and Ciara Glennon and found not guilty of the murder of Sarah Spears. The court believed he was likely responsible, but could not prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He now remains in custody while awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for December 23rd of this year. Jenny Rimmer, Jane's mother, still goes to the cemetery to talk to her daughter. She says, quote, "I miss her. I just think to myself, she would be married with probably 3 or 4 children. She loved children. It's just so sad that she never got to do that." She described Edwards' arrest as a shock. "I never thought they'd find anybody," Ms. Rimmer said. "It had been going on for so long, and I just thought it was a lost cause." Dennis Glennon, Ciara's father, revealed that he had made a graveside pledge to his daughter. Quote, "Shortly after her funeral, I visited Ciara's grave alone, and there I made a personal commitment to her. I told her I would do all in my power to find the person or persons responsible for killing her, or I would die trying." He also praised his daughter's bravery and courage. 23 years ago, he had stood in front of reporters, begging for information about her. "Through tears, I said she would fight for her life because of the way she was brought up. As she fought to save her life, she left us vital DNA clues, but she could not save herself." The Spears family fight is not over. Quote, "We knew that there was a chance that he would not get convicted on Sarah because of the lack of evidence," says her father, Don Spears. "But in our hearts, we knew that he was guilty. That gave us great peace of mind, that he was going to be put away and taken out of the community. He'll never bother anyone again. There's probably not an hour of any day that passes that I don't think of Sarah. It was our lovely daughter, and we'll never forget that. Never, never, ever." Case cracked. We would like to thank longtime brain scratcher Babel Froggy for her excellent research on this case. Wikipedia, abc.net.au, New Zealand Herald, the Daily Mail, and WA Today. Of course, a big thank you to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and let's bring her on to chat with us about it right now. Well, Christy, this is one that it kind of reaches back. It was pretty early on with BrainScratch that we hit this story, and it was nice to see progress that was happening on it so quickly to after we did the coverage. I mean, I'm not saying that we had anything to do with it, but it was just kind of my dream that, we would hit more of these. We would hit more stories where we had covered them and be able to do Case Cracked episodes about those specific stories. Let me ask you, being a woman and hearing about these situations that were going on with these young ladies who just wanted to go out and have a good time and then wind up victims of, I think it's pretty fair to call this guy a monster. What are your feelings about this case? What do you take away from it?
Well, it is disturbing. I remember being that age, and you feel like you know everything. You feel like you've got everything under control, and you'll be just fine. But you just cannot. You can't drop your guard.
Yeah.
So many women nowadays will go out with groups of friends and then leave them. After you've been at a bar drinking all night, that is not the best thing in the world to do. There's always safety in numbers. Stay with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And nowadays it's even a little different because in the 90s, they're calling it taxi service. And we heard in the story how they were trying to address that. I mean, these are vehicles that usually have decals on them. They've usually got equipment that's very easy to identify. Okay, that's a taxi. Nowadays, we've got ride shares. So all of those kind of decals. And I mean, yes, you might have a logo in a window or something like that, but how hard would it be for someone to fake that? I'm thankful that we kind of have a little more awareness, I guess, now where we've actually got some processes where, you're supposed to wait for the driver to actually confirm your name before you get into their vehicle and things like that. But still, when you're 20 or 21 and out drinking, are you thinking about that stuff necessarily? I don't know. But I do know way too many stories that I've covered on this, and not just about young women, but young men also involve a component of going out with friends and then leaving. And all of a sudden someone's off on their own and we never see them again. And in a lot of the stories about men, these guys wind up in water sources and we're talking about finding their body a week or two later. So yeah, I think there's definitely, if there was a big message I could get out there on this episode, it would be to just remember to stay safe. You're going out with your friends with that intent, but then, things get a little loose. You get a little more loose about your safety. Oh, I'm just going to go grab a taxi. I think this story
Nobody expects their evening to end in abduction.
No. But it does sometimes. That's the thing. I mean, it's, so if you're one of these people that age, just hear this story and please learn from it. Or if you have children that age, you know what? Send them a link to this video. Just make sure they're aware that this kind of stuff does happen.
And there's so many little things that you can do to protect yourself if you do want to get away from your group. I mean, there are keychain fobs that you can buy that you can use for protection. Nowadays, we have panic buttons. We have location sharing.
Yeah.
There's just so much that you can do to help your children, to help yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you have to look into that stuff in advance. That's the one trick about it. You have to be ready for that stuff before you get into the situation where you actually need it.
Yeah.
A big question in this is, and I'll just ask you, I know I've looked into this case, you've looked into this case, we've talked to Babel Froggy a lot who's looked into this case. Do you think there's more victims out there, or do you think they've got them all listed?
It breaks my heart, but I know there's more victims out there. This can't be it.
Yeah. There's some strange time frames that are going on there with some of the earlier assaults kind of being the late 80s, and then kind of there seeming to be a gap, and then several assaults all clustered together in the 96 range. It kind of bothers me too. I think there's probably a more regular pattern that's going on here, but you're also seeing an escalation. You're seeing what was previously sexual assaults now turning into full-blown homicide. I have a feeling there might be other cases in there too, but thankfully he won't be seeing himself on the streets anytime soon.
No, and hopefully we'll find Sarah soon and we can prove something there.
Yeah. I mean, the family deserves that. With him being convicted, I don't know how these guys get to this point and don't just say, okay, well, here's the third one. I mean, he's convicted on 2. He's not going anywhere.
I've never understood that myself. That's why I always appreciate it in other countries where they have programs to where, we will lessen your sentence to a degree if you tell us where the body is hidden, where this person is. It gives them at least some kind of incentive to tell family what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like one of your family members heard that you're talking in a little upset tone and had to come in and check on you. Who was that just came into the frame there?
That would be Jazzy.
That was
Jazzy's
Jazzy.
the mom of the house. Yeah, she's got to know what's going on.
Good. Well, I'm glad she's checking on you. Also, a recent development that happened on this, literally just a few days before we recorded this episode, there was a fire at the home of Brad Edwards. It's being investigated. It's suspected that it is some form of arson. From the pictures that I've seen of it, it's a very small fire. Looks like it is on an outside wall. And my gut feeling is it kind of looks like a Molotov cocktail that was thrown at his house. What do you think?
That's my feeling. Yeah. And that's really, who can blame them? A lot of times I know places like that will get burned down. They'll get vandalized. People don't want to see it and be reminded. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Yeah. So I don't know that we'll really hear anything come out of that arson investigation, but so just one last big reminder, safety concerns. I mean, think about all the aspects of this story. People looking for rides, looking for a taxi driver. He happened to have a car that kind of looked like a lot of the taxis at that time. Nowadays, we don't even have that consideration because we've got ride sharing. The car can look like anything. This is a guy that worked for a telecommunications company. I don't remember the scope of his work, but this is someone that might have been working out in the community regularly. I mean, he has a vehicle, so I'm assuming he's out and about. Timekeeper for kids' athletics clubs. I mean, this is a guy that was, you heard it, he was being recognized by the community, which means he was around the community a lot. And it's just a very important reminder that we make contact, maybe not this year, but in previous years, we make contact with a lot of people that we don't know a whole lot about. So having some of those mechanisms to make sure you're safe, really, really important. Any last thoughts or comments on that, Christy?
Not really that I can think of, but just speaking, I guess, of, people that you don't think about. Maybe pay attention next time somebody reads your meter or comes in to fix your cable. Think about these things because they'll hit you when you least expect it. Yeah,
that's a really good point. Well, thank you so much, Christy. Thank you for your time. And we've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Michael Park, Kelly Joe from I Am Me, and a special thank you to retired Sergeant Melinda. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. All of it keeps me here with limited commercials, so I really appreciate your support with that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Arts story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Or I'll see you again on YouTube on Wednesday with a brand new episode of Searchlight right here on the Lord and Arts channel.